Hi class, this is our class activity 2, and I want to read the questions because each group is going to do a separate problem, so you may not read a question other than the one that you're doing, so let me read it for you. Question 1, Amy offers to sell her house located at 6252 Stonewick Drive to Peter for $500,000. Peter accepts Amy's offer. The parties reach an oral agreement. Does this contract fall within the statute of frauds? And will the oral contract between Amy and Peter be enforceable? That is up to group 1 to answer. Question 2. On April 1st, 2024, Lisa orally agreed with the concert venue to perform a single performance scheduled for September 15th, 2025 at 6:00 p.m. at the concert venue. Does this contract fall within the statute of frauds? And for the second part, will the oral contract between Lisa and the venue be enforceable? Question 3. Larrabee owns a boutique shop where she sells ladies' accessories, items such as hats, scarves, belts, and jewelry. Louise owns a leather factory where she makes unique handcrafted belts and handbags of fine leather. Larrabee has been buying from Louise's factory for many years. Usually Louise calls Larrabee to let her know about a new product. Larrabee says, okay, and they have an oral contract. The ladies make an oral contract for Larrabee to buy 600 hand-braided belts in assorted colors and sizes for $18.75 each, payment in 60 days. Part A, or the first question, is does this contract between Larrabee and Louise fall within the statute of frauds? The second part is will the contract between Larrabee and Louise be enforceable? Question 4 for group 4. Lisa, age 17, has been accepted to the college of her dreams, University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. Lisa has been offered some scholarships and grants, but not enough to cover tuition and room and board. She applies for the school's loans through the university's financial aid office. Because Lisa is not 18 yet, Loans R Us, the lender, demands that someone co-sign Lisa's federal and private loans. Lisa asked her favorite uncle, Richie, if he would be willing to co-sign her loans. He is happy to serve as her co-signer, even though he knows that if Lisa defaults, he will be liable to pay her loans. A, does a contract between Loans R Us and Uncle Richie for Richie to serve as Lisa's co-signer fall within the statute of frauds? B, will an oral contract between Loans R Us and Uncle Richie for Richie to serve as Lisa's co-signer be enforceable? Those are the first 4 questions, the first 4 groups. Now, group 5. Fred and Wilma have no children, but they do own Pebble Rock, the family farm, which has been in the family for over 5 generations. Fred and Wilma no longer live at the Pebble Rock home. Instead, they live in a wonderful retirement community. They would like to sell the Pebble Rock property, but would prefer to keep it in the family. After considering many nieces and nephews and a few cousins, Fred and Wilma decide that Billy and Betty would be best suited to take over the farm. They invite Billy and Betty to their home in the retirement community for coffee and pie and offer them Pebble Rock for $750,000. Bill and Betty are overjoyed and gratefully accept the offer. Now notice this is an oral offer. Fred and Wilma and Billy and Betty all shake hands and agree to transfer title on Thanksgiving Day of 2024. However, in October of 2024, Fred and Wilma move into the home. They move into the Pebble Rock home and begin making improvements to the home. When Thanksgiving Day rolls around, Billy and Betty they get an invitation, from Fred and Wilma to come over for dinner, and Fred and Wilma want to transfer title to the Pebble Rock home. However, Billy and Betty, and I think I've said Bill, but it's Billy and Betty, declined the invitation, saying they've changed their minds about being farmers. In a lawsuit for breach of contract, Billy and Betty plead the statute of frauds as a defense. Will the oral contract between Fred, Wilma, Billy, and Betty be enforceable? Number 6, group 6. I'm skipping questions. James is an author famous for his lengthy works of historical fiction. When James begins work on a new novel, he hires a bunch of college students as part-time researchers and fact-checkers. He pays them generously, and the jobs are coveted in the small college town where James lives and works. James has thought of a new idea for a novel about the Italian Renaissance, and he posts advertisement for researchers and fact-checkers at the local college. Dan replies to James' ad and comes to meet the author for an interview. James is impressed with Dan's eagerness. And I should say Dan replies to James' ad and comes to meet the author for an interview. And James is impressed with Dan's eagerness. And on July 1st, 2023, James offers Dan the position, offering to pay $15 per hour for about 10 hours a week. James tells Dan he needs his services for 7 months to begin March 1st, 2024. Dan accepts on the spot, and James gives Dan his first research assignment. Remember that the work does not start until March 1st, 2024. And it's supposed to go for 7 months. They sign the agreement, they agree to it. They don't sign anything on July 1st, 2023. Dan is eager, even though he's not supposed to start until March, and he hurries off to the library. Dan is excited, but Dan's work will not start until March 1st, 2024. Does the contract between Dan and James fall within the statute of frauds? Will the oral contract between James and Dan be enforceable? Number 7 for group 7. David and Christy are contemplating marriage. And Christy is a former New York fashion model. She owns her own apartment in Manhattan. And David, I hope I was saying David, is a budding real estate tycoon and has already acquired several buildings. Despite his qualms, David and Christy agreed to an oral prenuptial agreement in which they both fully disclosed their current property holdings. After they married, Christy gave up her career and raised the 3 children. 14 years later, they decide to divorce. David would like to enforce the parties' oral prenuptial agreement. A, does this prenuptial agreement between David and Christy fall within the statute of frauds? B, will the oral prenuptial agreement between David and Christy be enforceable? Okay. Group 8. Sarah and Kylie make a written contract for Sarah to sell a house on 1234 Mitchell Lane for $500,000 to Kylie. The contract was signed by both parties. The contract contains all the pertinent terms and was the final contract between the parties. Will Kylie be able to bring in parole evidence that before the contract was made, Sarah agreed to make improvements to the house? Now, number 9, Jessica and Susan agreed or entered into a written contract for the sale of a house. The written contract provided that Susan would sell her house, which was on 2222 Wesley Road, to Jessica. The contract was signed by both the parties. The contract contained all the pertinent terms and was the final contract between the parties. Will Jessica be able to bring in parole evidence that after the contract was made, Susan agreed to make improvements to the house?